Hey everyone, Tactics here with a quick guide to the Sanguine Depths dungeon on Mythic difficulty. In this video I'll go through the dungeon specific Covenant ability, the different boss mechanics, as well as important trash abilities to be aware of. If you found this video useful, please make sure you like and subscribe to be notified when I post more Warcraft content, and let's get right into it, starting with a special bonus for members of the Venthyr Covenant. Throughout the dungeon in several places there are these anima cages that can only be interacted with if you're part of the Venthyr Covenant. Once activated, it will debuff all enemies within 40 yards for 20 seconds, and when that debuff expires, it will grant your entire party stacks of Sinfall Boon based on the number of debuff enemies slain. Sinfall Boon grants 5% increased damage and healing per stack for 1 minute, so for example, if you debuff 10 enemies with the anima cage but only kill 5 in the 20-second duration, your entire party will have the 25% increased damage and healing for 1 minute. From there, let's talk bosses, starting with Crixus the Voracious. For tanks, he has a knockback and vicious headbutt, so make sure you aren't pushed off the edge of the room. He will also target a random player with Juggernaut Rush, and you'll want to stand between the boss and this targeted player, as the damage is split between all targets hit. Do note that this also has a knockback attached to it, so again, watch the edge. He also has a Channeled Cast and Hungering Drain, which you'll want to interrupt as soon as possible, as it grants him a stacking damage done increase. Finally, at 100 energy, he will do Severing Smash, dealing party-wide damage, knocking everyone back, and spawning a Living Essence on each player's location. These are orbs that will move towards Crixus, and if they get to him, they will heal him. To prevent this, you need to soak the orbs, but beware as they will deal shadow damage to the entire party when soaked, so you may need to stagger your soak so you don't kill your friends in the process. From there, the fight just repeats until you kill him. Next up, there's Executor Tarvold, who on pull will launch 2 orbs of sin-touched anima that rotate in opposite directions around the prison, each taking up half the hall. You'll want to avoid these as best as you can, as if they hit you they'll deal shadow damage and reduce your haste by 25% for 12 seconds. Aside from these orbs, he'll summon a fleeting manifestation that deals pulsing AoE damage and gradually gains energy over time. On death or upon reaching 100 energy, they will drop a pool of residue on the ground where its size will be based on the energy used, so you'll want to kill these as quickly as possible. The only other ability is Castigate, which will go on one player, causing them to deal pulsing shadow damage to allies within 8 yards, so this player just needs to stand away from the rest of the group. Moving on, we have Grand Proctor Berillia, who is fairly straightforward. She will use Iron Spikes on your tank, which is just 4 big physical hits, so you may need a cooldown for this. She will also use Agonize on random people throughout the fight, which is a 6-second dot that deals shadow damage. Endless Torment will deal pulsing holy damage to all players for 5 seconds, and will also trigger Anguished Cries, which launches swirlies around the room that you'll want to dodge. Lastly, at full energy, she'll do a 10-second cast called Rite of Supremacy, which will deal large pulse of shadow damage to the party and put the Agonize debuff on everyone when completed. While this is channeling, 15 fragments of Radiance will spawn, reducing the damage taken by this ability by 20% per orb, stacking 5 times, so use these to not be one-shot. That leaves us with the final boss, General Call, who is a bit different than most bosses, as you'll be fighting him alongside the trash packs leading up to his room, though he doesn't do all his abilities. You'll want to make sure someone in your party has picked up the Naru Shield after Grand Proctor Berillia, as you'll need it for this fight, since it creates a bubble granting 65% damage reduction and makes you immune to knockbacks, which is important. In terms of abilities, Call will select 2 players to dash with Wicked Rush, putting the Wicked Gash debuff on them and any allies within 5 yards. This bleed has no duration, only being removed by the previously mentioned shield. You'll want to save the use of this shield for Gloom Squall, which is cast at 100 energy, as it deals a large burst of party-wide damage and launches anyone not inside the bubble, likely to their death. So when he begins casting the spell, you'll want to stack up and have your shield bearer use the extra action button to pop the bubble. Aside from that, the only other ability is Piercing Blur, which will spawn 3 images of Call that will deal damage in a line after a couple seconds, though they are staggered, so you'll need to dance a bit to avoid these. Continue until the boss reaches 50% health and you win. When it comes to trash, the scariest mobs by far are the Grand Overseers. First, they have an aura when engaged, putting a 2% reduction on your damage and healing, which stacks the longer they're alive. Curse of Suppression is something you'll always want to interrupt, which silences a player for 5 seconds. He will also occasionally cast Dread Bindings, which will chain party members near the Overseer, dealing shadow damage and reducing their move speed until you break it by running away or the Overseer dies. Outside of this, he will just spam Gloom Burst on party members, which is a single target nuke. Besides these Overseers, there is a mini-boss and Head Custodian Javelin, who will shoot tornadoes at players with Sweeping Slash that deal a chunk of damage and knock back. He also has a tank knockback in Bludgeoning Bash, and will also club one of the dredgers he's pulled with to grant them bonus health and haste, so beware of the large red adds. Aside from that, there's only a few other trash mobs to be worried about. Insatiable Brutes are present early on in the dungeon and will heal for 25% of their melee damage. They will also target an area to jump to, dealing damage and leeching health from all targets hit, so make sure you dodge the blue swirly. Gluttonous Ticks are also around early on, and you'll want to interrupt their Engorge ability, as when they die, they'll explode, dealing shadow damage to nearby party members based on the number of stacks. Lastly, there's Regal Mist Dancers spread throughout the dungeon, who will put a large pool of Sanctified Mists on the ground that will buff enemy damage by 50%, so make sure you move the mobs out of it. But that is it for my quick guide to Sanguine Depths on Mythic difficulty. If you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure you like and subscribe, it really does help. I'll be putting out quick guides for the rest of the Shadowlands dungeons in the coming days before Shadowlands release, so keep an eye out for those. You can also check me out on Twitch or follow me on Twitter for updates, both at Tactics. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.